A very pleasant good morning to everyone. Let me first of all recognize the Honorable Prime Minister, Roosevelt Skerrit, Honorable Kasani Laville, Minister for Public Works and the Digital Economy, Honorable Greta Roberts, Minister for Governance, Public Service Reform, Citizen Empowerment, Social Justice and Ecclesiastical Affairs, members of Cabinet who are present this morning, permanent secretaries, staff of the Ministry of Public Works, General Manager of the WASCO, Mr. Etinov, members of the media, and the general public listening to us this morning via various media forms. Let me welcome you again to another edition of our Cabinet Press Conference. And today we are featuring the Minister for the Public Service, who is Honorable Greta Roberts, and also the Minister for Public Works and the Digital Economy. As you are aware, there are a number of government programs and projects which have been placed on very high priority this financial year and continue to be a priority for government. This morning, the Minister for the Public Service will speak to you on some of those programs and initiatives as it relates to the public service of Dominica. Honorable Roberts. Before Honorable Roberts comes on, we will have opening remarks from the Honorable Prime Minister at this time.
Thank you. Let me recognize Honorable Roberts, Honorable Laville, and my other colleagues who are here, the press, and of course to the viewing and listening public. Good morning all, and thanks to the press for being present. As you know, we made a commitment to meet with the press at least once a month, where particular ministers would come in to present, and of course questions will be posed to them and possibly myself as well. This is another opportunity in a whole list of opportunities which the government provides for the public to have access to information, and of course for the media on behalf of the public to ask certain questions which they believe are pertinent to the particular point in time or period. Just to say to you that we were in Parliament last week, and there were a number of very important resolutions that were passed in the Parliament. One of them was the approval for the loan of 67 million EC dollars from the World Bank, and those funds will be available to the country very soon in the course of the next couple of days. And they will be used for various, to advance various government's programs and projects and activities. The mobilization of these funds are critical because we all know the impact of COVID-19 on all economies in the world. And of course, the strain on the finances of the country, and therefore we needed to ensure that we mobilize the additional resources to fill the financing gap and to ensure that we can have some robustness in the economy while we work towards seeing the end of this pandemic and we can get back to a state of normalcy. And of course, there was a resolution calling on the United States on the removal of the blockade against Cuba and the listing of Cuba on the list, the so-called list of state sponsored terrorists. And we're happy in a historic fashion to declare as a parliament to the world that we stand in solidarity. And of course, this is something that happens every year at the United Nations, where a resolution is put forth before the United Nations. And out of the out of the 193 countries of the United Nations, only 2 usually support for the keeping of the embargo against Cuba, the entire world. This is why I believe that it was noteworthy that the leader of the opposition decided to walk out of the parliament and not stay in the parliament to signal his personal support as the leader of the opposition on this very historic matter, and a matter of global interest, where, and I believe that this might be the only leader of the opposition in the world that really does not support, appear in his actions, the removal of the embargo against Cuba, because he has not articulated his position on it. And if he had an opportunity in the parliament to articulate his position on it, one would expect him to stay in the parliament and to let the Hansard and the records of the parliament show and state what's the position of the UWP. Because people can speak, but if they, in the government, the ultimate policy maker is the Prime Minister. And if the Prime Minister is of a different view from another minister, then it is the Prime Minister's view that anybody has to take. And the leader of the opposition is the principal policy maker for his party, and it is unfortunate that he wasn't there. And the other resolution that we put forward was based on a request from members of the United Workers opposition, 2 sitting members of Parliament and 2 former members of Parliament made a request to the Speaker of the House, the Clerk of the House, claiming that they should have been paid, or they owed monies by the Parliament, because they should have started receiving their salaries from the day after elections and not the day of the oath in Parliament. Now, the reality is, this has been a practice even before Dominica became an associated state, has status of associated statehood. So this was this practice of the Parliament that you get paid when you take your oath. But in the, I do not want it to, anybody to think that we are imposing the majority view or the existing practice in the Parliament. If someone, if a member says that he has been denied his property, then the only entity that can address salaries and remuneration of parliamentarians is the legislature itself. So the Speaker doesn't have the authority on his own, and certainly the Clerk doesn't have his authority on his own, and certainly Prime Minister, Minister of Finance could not so instruct the Treasury to pay. So we had to bring a resolution. There was a request from the Member of Parliament from Rosenhoff, and the 2 members was missed, the member for Salisbury and the member of Rosenhoff, who asked for the money to be paid, and of course the former member of Marigot, Mr. James, and the former member of Rosa Central, Mr. Prevo. The Parliament took a decision to refer the matter to the Standing Orders Committee that will review this request and advise the Parliament on the course of action. So this is what it is. And of course there were some amendments to some existing legislation addressing some administrative challenges confronting the proper functioning and administration of some of those entities. The Wildlife Act and of course the Solid Waste Management Act was also amended. And there was a laying on the table of the agreement, the loan agreement between the Government of Dominica and the Caribbean Development Bank as well. So that, in a nutshell, what transpired in the Parliament at the last sitting of our Parliament. Now, the economy hasn't gotten back to where it was pre the pandemic. As you know, our economy was projected to grow by 5.6% in 2020, following on a 9.7 or 6% the year before, with a number of capital projects that were on stream. But here came the pandemic and shutdowns and travel restrictions, etc. And every country in the world has suffered from this pandemic. And the reality is the situation persists, albeit not as dramatic as it was in 2020, but the reality is you're not bringing in the revenues that you were bringing in at the same period in 2019. But we're seeing progress. We're seeing improvement in the economy, and of course we're marking this by the revenues coming from the income tax and of course from the value-added tax. and these things are happening. But notwithstanding the challenge of the economy, we continue to maintain all our commitments to our seniors, to our pensioners. There's no pensioner in Dominica who has gotten his pension late or not at all. We have maintained payments of salaries to public officers. We have also maintained payments, consistent payments to the National Parent Program, to the 17 over allowance, notwithstanding the fact that maybe one or two students in between who sometimes are not dealt with administratively in terms of the payments of the school fees. We have paid in for this financial year about $22 million to students studying overseas. $22 million, for instance. And also state to the Dominican public, when we complain that there's no money in the economy or there's no jobs, the records show that just Haitian nationals sent out $22 million in 2020 via MoneyGram and Western Union. $22 million in COVID period. I can see the total shock in the eyes of the press. You know, $22 million, and in 2019 they sent out $23 million. So I wanted to put out this important piece of fact so people appreciate that we may not be all where we are, but there are opportunities for us as Dominicans to do so. And one of the things I want to commend Dominicans for in large measure is the industry and industriousness of Dominicans. People have adapted as a result of COVID-19, and you've seen people change their business model. They have brought in new businesses. And my hope and prayer is that we will see these things continue with us as a legacy of COVID-19, where people can less complaining and people more concentrating on how can I adapt to the circumstance, the reality. And so instead of people coming to buy stuff from your place, you send it to their homes for them, you're delivering it for them, et cetera, and so forth. So there are a number of new businesses that have evolved as a result of COVID-19, and really exciting, and I think it's important for us to provide that support to those type of enterprises going forward. And so notwithstanding the economy, we have a number of projects, and the Minister of Public Health will speak to some of those. There are programs in the Ministry of Public Service that the Minister, I believe, may highlight some of those. And everything costs money. Whether it's a project or a program or initiative, they cost money. You know, but the roads are in pretty good condition. Those that needed patching, they've been maintained. New roads have been constructed. $127 million project has started. You know, we're building bridges and more bridges to come. We're building homes and more homes to come. We're building health centers and more health centers to come. We're building the Marigold Hospital, and I have not been to the Marigold Hospital recently, but people who have been there and who have gone inside are telling me, you know, this is something out of this world. It is an edifice to behold. And I believe that it speaks to the overall commitment and seriousness of the government that we made a promise that we're going to deliver, and we're delivering on this promise to the people. So we're not where we want to get to, and of course with regards to international airport, in the midst of the pandemic. All of us have families, we have an income, and we sit down and we decide how we're going to spend that income, how we're going to appropriate it. And I'm sure all of us here who are responsible, and when I say all of us here, I mean the Dominican public in general, those of us who are responsible, when we're hit with this kind of challenges, we sit down and we decide what the priorities are. So things we did in 2019, many of us did not do it in 2020 and 2021 because we do not know what tomorrow is going to bring in terms of the pandemic. And so we have had to cut. Some of us have gone on, instead of a 5-day work program, we're on 3 days or 4 days. Instead of a 40-week program, we're on 30 days. And therefore, our revenue or income would have dropped. We have to now adapt and to see what additional income we're going to bring to meet some of those basic needs. That's no different from the government. So even when I hear people talking about, oh, well, Skerrit say he promised the Roseau Enhancement Project, where is it? We did the bridge. We constructed all of the retaining walls. We did the promenade. Now that is the place to be anyway in the OECS in terms of a lime. On any night of any night of any day of the week. So these things were part of the Roseau Enhancement. And we also said the country, the next step was to do the Great George Street, the King George V Street, and Independence Street as the next phase. And we should have started that in 2020, but what do? Should I have done the streets and tell the students studying overseas, come back home, you'll go to school when coronavirus is over, and take it $22 billion and fix the streets? Or should I have told the NEP, the 3.8 we're paying every month, that you will have to end this thing, and so because we need the money to do Independence Street, King George V Street, and Great George Street? No. We have to reprioritize. Or do I tell people, let's all get COVID, the 15,000 people that was projected or forecasted by the leader of the opposition to get the coronavirus, that let us start, as one member of parliament said, a senator said, that we should have budgeted for people dying as a result of coronavirus. So now that we're seeing things getting a little better, we are going to commence Great George Street insofar as the Roseau Enhancement Project is concerned. And I believe there's a meeting today, Minister, with the stakeholders, and to plan to engage the public, those especially on the Great George Street, the businesses and the residences there, so that we share them the implementation plan and the challenges that we're having, and speaking to Domlec and Wasco and Lime and Digicel regards to the sewage system, the water lines, and the placing of the electrical lines and the telephone lines on underground ducts. So we will be getting back to this and so on. But we're talking about the international airport, which will be the largest infrastructural project the country will ever see. Ever see. And this has been conceived in our most difficult period in the world, that we're speaking about international airport. And so there are people who not want to talk about those things, but it's important for us to talk about those things. And of course, in regards to, we have 2 shelters being constructed. We're there on Tuesday to visit one of them. It was $13 million. You're driving on the Jimmy Highway. Some of you, we all drive there very fast, so we don't have time to watch left to right. And so we don't see this massive edifice being constructed, $13 million. And then you go to Castle Bruce, another one, I believe it's about $14 or $15 million being built in the village of Castle Bruce. Emergency shelters, which is part of our resilience agenda, to ensure that in the event that we are visited by a disaster, that our population would be safer. And these buildings would be self-contained, self-sustained, so they can provide water independent of Duasco for some weeks, and will have its generation of own power in the event that it's cut off the grid. And in the one in Jimit, I have been told it can house in excess of 500 people for no less than 2 weeks or 3 weeks without having to rush to the grocery store or fetch water in a bucket in the river. You'll have the massive tanks both on the foundation and on the roof, collecting rainwater and, of course, additional supply from the Duasco line where necessary. And we're in the design phase with regards to the one in the Carnago Territory, Saturday constituency. That will be jointly financed by the government of Dominica and the CDB. We have the funds committed by the CDB for this, and the government has also put in its counterpart funding, I believe of about over $1.5 million for this. And then we'll be having one eventually in Portsmouth, in Marigot, in Granby, and in Roseau area to capture those other centers and so forth. And there's one, of course, in Layo for St. Joseph, Layo, Mero, etc. So work is going on. We have gone to tender for the 50 homes to be financed by the European Union in the Salibé constituency, in the Carnago Territory in particular. And based on advice from the NO, we will see actual work started in July, very early July of 2021, 50 homes for the Carnago people, enhancing the housing infrastructure in the Carnago territory, and hence enhancing their resilience and in improving the quality of life. Because I believe one of the main ways of addressing poverty in any country, including Dominica, is through housing. Access to better sanitation, electricity, water, sewage system, management of liquid and solid waste, housing. Once a man has a shelter, he can find his way, he can fight his way. And this is why we have been focusing so heavily on housing in Dominica as the Labour Party, because we understand and appreciate the importance of it. The other point I want to raise with you before I pass on to the two people that you're really interested in today, the Minister for Public Works and the Minister for the Public Service. I am just sort of an insect in the ointment there, so I will leave you very soon. It's regards to the vaccination program. I believe, all things considered, we're not doing too badly where the vaccination is concerned. Over 18,000 people have received the first dose, and over 10,000 have received the second dose. All things considered, I don't think we're doing too badly. But the reality is, we would like for all of us who are adults, 18 and over, to get vaccinated. It's an important part of getting back to normal. And you're seeing countries starting to relax their protocols for people who are vaccinated. And so, let us not wait for one. We have to travel to some other country, then harass the minister, WhatsApp the Prime Minister saying, if you can help me get a vaccine, I have to go to Barbados, I have to go to America, I have to go to England, and so on and so forth. And I took my first shot, but blah, 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 I haven't taken my first shot yet, and I booked my ticket for July or August and so on. We have an opportunity now in an organized, managed fashion to get vaccinated. And even in Dominica too, you will very soon announce the changing of protocols. For vaccinated people who are going to come into Dominica. We'll be reducing on the quarantine period for people who are vaccinated. And we'll be also articulating new protocols for cruise passengers, because the reality is, I believe, in my mind, I am convinced, I am satisfied that I will authorize, as the Prime Minister, the cruise lines to come into Dominica in June of this year. And therefore, all the persons who are involved in the hospitality and tourism and cruise ship business, it is in your interest to get vaccinated. Because one of the things we're going to be doing in the government is to amend the certification criteria to include vaccination as part of it for those who are involved in tourism. Similar to how the food handlers license is done, that you have to go and do a tuberculosis test and etc. Before you can get the food handler's license, and for good reason. And for good reason. Because if you're going to touch food that people are going to eat, people have to know that you will not transmit anything to them. And then you have to carry a badge every time you're in this restaurant or you're in this bar, on your chest, right there, visible. Some people put it on the shelves where the bushram normally is placed, and so you see it. So these things have to be done, and we're doing these things for the well-being and the welfare of the Dominican people. If you want our bank account to start receiving income in the manner in which you received it in 2019, what do you have to do in this new dispensation? You cannot be a tour guide and not want to get vaccinated, because the person who is going to want you to take them to Tito Gorge and to Trafalgar Falls and to the Boiling Lake and to the Brewery Lake, they're going to want to know that you're vaccinated, because they have to protect themselves. And they're going to demand that I will only go on a tour with people who are vaccinated. And the person will have a right to so demand. And those of us who are vendors, you're going to be interacting with thousands of people on a weekly basis. And you want to know that you have an armor of defense with the vaccines. An armor of defense with the vaccines. So it's important for us to recognize that we have to set aside all these schisms, all of these things we read on YouTube and Facebook and all these social media platforms and so on. It's important for us to read this thing, but it's also for us to understand what we're reading and to comprehend what we're reading and to understand what is in our best interest. And as I keep saying, we're lucky in Dominica, and we thank God for this, that we have vaccines in Dominica. There are countries that are asking us for the doses that we have left because they need it. And just to say to you, we have also partnered with the cruise lines. There's some cruise lines that are residents in the Caribbean who have been partners of Dominica for several years. We've also facilitated the vaccination of the crew so that they themselves in a better position to start back the business. And you may have seen a cruise ship come ashore over the weekend. And so they actually came to pick up the vaccines that we're giving to them to vaccinate the crew. And the interesting thing is that people who don't want to take vaccines, they're the most excited about when they see a cruise ship passing Dominica waters, you know. And somebody messaged me, the boat coming for tuna, boy? You know, so there is a legitimate understanding of why people behave that way, because there are people who rely strictly on tourism to survive. And just to say to you, at the time that this coronavirus came, Jungle Bay was packed for the rest of 2020. Kempinski was talking about high numbers. Things were looking up. And in a study done independent of the government, it shows that the investment that we made in the hotels, with Kempinski opening, with Jungle Bay opening, with the expansion of Secret Bay, that there would have been an increase in revenue of $40 million going to the Treasury. That is outside of Tranquility, outside of Marriott. That's outside of the one in the valley, Rainforest. That is in respect to those that have opened and tied $40 million. So when people talk about what is government's economic policies and what is government plans for creating jobs, we have been investing heavily in the jobs in Dominica. Working in the private sector, causing them to have access to cheaper financing, to invest in businesses, to create the sustainable jobs in the economy. And of course, finally, with regards to geothermal as well, which is a major transformational project, we are seeing light at the end of the tunnel. Where this project is concerned, we have gone to tender for certain components of the project. The tenders have been sent back in, and I believe that we are in a position to issue a contract for the commencement in earnest of the geothermal project in Dominica. And so we're very grateful for that. Dr. Henderson, Ambassador Henderson, has been exceptional in his guidance in this regard. And of course, our friends from the World Bank and from the UK government, the French, they have been all exceptional in their partnership, and we want to thank them for this partnership that they've had, and we're very grateful for this. And of course, this will certainly be a transformational project in terms of enhancing our image globally as a leader in renewable energy, a leader in combating the climate change, and a leader in protecting the environment. But very importantly too, this will translate to better economic opportunities for us in terms of the cost of doing business. The hotels, have to have the air conditioning on 24/7, and we will see a reduction in the electricity bills. And once you can reduce costs, you will increase on your profitability. And the consumers, domestic consumers, will also expect to see a decrease in the price. I will say something to you finally. That in respect to DOMLEC, the government is not ruling out the possibility of engaging the main shareholder of Domlec with a view for government acquiring the majority shares in Domlec. And I believe that by doing so, we would address the historic wrong, because I believe fundamentally that issue of water and electricity should remain in the hands of the state. We have had great partnerships, so we know that we are upset with the majority shareholders. We have had great relationship with them. We've had great relationship with Domlec and the management. So we know that we have any issues with them. But we believe, especially with the advent of the geothermal and our thrust towards the use of renewable energy, I think this would place Dominic and the people of Dominic in a much better position and so on. So I'm throwing this out to the public, but as the days and weeks go by, I'll be in a better position to firm up the government's position in respect to this matter. I thank you for the courtesy of listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Prime Minister, for this very comprehensive snapshot. At this time, we will now call on Honorable Greta Roberts as she does a presentation on the public service.
Good morning, everybody. My mic is on. Honorable Dr. Roosevelt Skerrit, Prime Minister of Dominica, my cabinet colleague, Honorable Kasani Laville, Minister for Public Works and the Digital Economy, Ms. Karen Prevost, Secretary to the Cabinet and Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Governance, Acting Chief Personnel Officer, Ms. Barbara Daly, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Public Works, Ms. Cecilia Carr, Director of Public Service Reform, other Permanent Secretaries, the Manager of the WASCO, Mr. Etinoff, staff of the Ministry of Governance, and staff of the Ministry of Public Works, cabinet colleagues, my apologies, members of the media, listeners, both here and overseas, a blessed day to you all. Public service institutions are at the forefront of national and global responses to protect development and enable recovery, resilience, and growth. The general consensus is that an agile, adaptive public service is needed in tandem with the shifting needs of the public. This year has been a very trying season for the entire public service, but even more so for public officers who serve on the front line. Together, we have all played a role in ensuring that there is continuity in public service delivery, one of the fundamental principles which guides the public service. Despite the many challenges and obvious setback triggered by the lingering impact of COVID-19, government remains satisfied at efforts to keep all public officers employed in a secure and safe working environment. The organizational review and reclassification of the public service is ongoing. Negotiations with all trade unions have been completed for the 2018-2021 triennium, and the appointment of public officers remain a priority. I will now speak to some of these initiatives. The organizational review and reclassification exercise. The government of Dominica has contracted the services of the Caribbean Center for Development Administration, CARICAD, to undertake a comprehensive organizational review and reclassification exercise. The consultancy commenced in earnest in November of 2020 and is currently progressing satisfactorily. The consultancy comprises of two major components: the conduct of an organizational review of the public service and the conduct of a job evaluation and reclassification exercise. CARICAD was contracted due to its familiarity with the public service of the Commonwealth of Dominica and its organizational context. The organization has successfully executed a series of assignments and participated in a number of initiatives in the area of human resource management in Dominica. To date, the following has been achieved under the organizational review and reclassification of the public service: the establishment of a steering committee and job evaluation committee, the selection of public officers to undertake job analysis, job description writing, and human resource audit training. Approximately 35 public officers and union representatives will be trained. The training is expected to commence this month, May of 2021. The collection of data and macroeconomic analysis for the rationalization of allowances have also been completed with input from the Ministry of Finance. A robust communication plan has been developed, and the general public and public officers will be frequently updated on the progress of this consultancy. A situational analysis is currently being conducted by the consultants. Phase 2 interviews with a wide range of stakeholders with the public sector will be undertaken during this month, starting as early as this week. The private sector and other external partners will also be consulted during the process. Salary negotiations 2018 to 2021. The government's negotiation team resumed negotiations in the height of a global pandemic, despite regional and international pressures on employment in the public and private sectors due to COVID-19. I am pleased to report that we have honored our obligations to public officers, and in that regard, negotiations with all public sector unions, the Dominica Association of Teachers, the Dominica Public Service Union, and the Police Welfare Association have been completed for the 2018-2021 triennium. Government's priority during this current crisis has always been to keep all public officers employed and to ensure that salaries are paid on time. Maintaining employment in the public sector is critical to the stability of the economy during this COVID-19 pandemic. In this context, the negotiating teams have agreed to the following: a one-off payment equivalent to 1 month's salary as at June 2019 for the year 2018-2019. This payment is to be made in 2 tranches of 50% each by December 2021 and June 2022. A 1.25% salary increase for the year 2019-2020. A 0% salary increase for the year 2020-2021 salary freeze. To date, the salary increase and the resulting back pay has been effected and processed. Government and the unions have also agreed on new measures to provide additional support to our public officers. The establishment of a public service emergency fund to be managed within the public service to provide support to public officers for post-disaster response, fire, hurricane, flooding, or any other major disaster, and medical emergencies. The fund to be made available throughout the public service would benefit all categories of officers and is to be mobilized in the 2021-2022 financial year. Secondly, the development of a proposal for subsidized housing. A concept note has been developed and proposal is currently being crafted in that regard. The government's negotiation team has already met with the unions for a first discussion on the concept to request their input to finalize the proposal. This particular project, which the Honorable Prime Minister has described as the Future Housing Project, is initially targeted to public officers and is earmarked for the development in the Warner area. The Future Housing Project will include modern amenities and resilient structures and will provide public officers with an opportunity to purchase homes at a subsidized cost. Significant collaboration between the unions and government on this project will continue in the interest of our public officers. Thirdly, additionally, government has prioritized the improvement in working conditions of public officers and has included within the collective bargaining agreements commitments regarding new public service legislation and the reclassification of the public service. Government and unions have agreed that the new public service management legislation will provide an improved working environment for all public officers. It has therefore been agreed that the Public Service Management Bill, the Public Service Management Regulations, the Public Service Management Unscheduled Employees Regulations, the Public Service Commission Regulations will be tabled in Parliament this year. The new public service legislation will replace the Public Service Act of 1991, general orders, and other regulations made under the Public Service Act, and will provide clear management and operational guidelines for the public service. Government has also committed to have a new structure for the teaching service in place by September of 2021, with new positions to be created for increased upward mobility in the teaching service, as announced by the Honorable Prime Minister in his 2019-2020 budget address. Government's team is finalizing the structure for approval, and we are on schedule for implementation in the new school year. Finally, government has also agreed to increase support to the union through an increase in the annual training grant, medical grant, and revolving funds of the Public Service Union, and an increase in the subvention to the Dominica Association of Teachers. Support to the unions come at a total cost of $690,000. The government of Dominica wishes to thank the unions for a cordial and cooperative spirit of the negotiations, and thanks all public officers for their continued contributions to the development of Dominica. Appointment of public officers. In keeping with government's pronouncements regarding the appointment of public officers, I can inform that this is an ongoing process. The Establishment, Personnel and Training Department continues to review and process recommendations for the approval from the Public Service Commission. As of April 30th, 2021, a total of 191 permanent appointments have been approved by the Public Service Commission for the 2020-2021 financial year. This represents a 142% increase over the previous year. This government recognizes and values the contribution of public officers in nation building and will continue to act in the best interest of all our public officers. Let me take this opportunity to thank all public officers for the dedicated service to the country in these challenging times. I highlight the work of our healthcare workers and other first responders for their heroic efforts in the fight against COVID-19. Let me also continue to encourage all public officers to get vaccinated. Getting vaccinated is critical for ensuring that we have a safe workplace for all our employees and we can safely deliver quality services to the public. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. And as Minister Roberts mentioned, the public service is transforming, modernizing, and the Ministry of Public Works and the digital economy has the responsibility to move us into that modernization era. At this time, we will welcome Honorable Kasani Laville, Minister for Public Works and the Digital Economy.
Prime Minister, Honorable Dr. Roosevelt Skerrit, my co-presenter, Honorable Roberts, Minister for Governance, Public Service Reform, Citizen Empowerment, Social Justice, and Ecclesiastical Affairs, members of Cabinet, Secretary to the Cabinet, Karine Prevost, Chief Personal Officer, Mrs. Barbara Daly, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Public Works Digital Economy, Mr. Roland Royer, CTO, Ministry of Public Works, Emil Lancelot, General Manager of DOASCO, Mr. Bernard Etinoff, Ms. Cecilia Carr, Director of Public Service Reform, staff of the Ministry of Public Works and Ministry of Governance, the media, listeners and viewers on various platforms, good afternoon. Permit me to say thank you for taking the time to follow the proceedings today. It is certainly my pleasure to convey to you the mandate, the vision, plans, and critical development initiatives that my ministry has engaged in recently. The Ministry of Public Works and the Digital Economy is but a small part of this holistic development thrust. As you heard the Prime Minister before me, certainly a tall order to follow him. I have never spoken after him, and Honorable Roberts also. We have been given a mandate for the administration and implementation of Dominica's physical and digital infrastructure and the management of Dominica's water resources. With this mandate, we are well aware that strategic planning is the only way to have focused development. Our interventions are therefore guided by a 2020 to 2025 strategic plan. And this reflects in government's budget statements and policy as well as our national agenda. And this is important to note so we can better appreciate government's efforts in our quest to build a more resilient Dominica in a structured way that fosters sustainable economic growth and development. Despite the efforts made thus far in developing public infrastructure, Dominica's terrain, coupled with the effects of climate change has posed significant challenges within the last 10 years. We have experienced many disasters. And not only that, but the frequency of those disasters give very little time to recover. With the experience of Tropical Storm Ophelia in 2011, the December 24th, 2013 trough system, Tropical Storm Erica in August of 2015, and Hurricane Maria in September of 2017. Effectively, we experience a major disaster every 2.5 years, with an average impact on GDP being about 59%. I do not know any other country who has been through these challenging times most recently. And when we seem to be spared from these natural phenomena, it appears that other crises still loom. In this case, the current COVID-19 pandemic has presented global economic challenges that has caused rippling effects for many of our sectors and has affected many of our people. But we keep pressing on. The government of Dominica, through the Ministry of Public Works and Digital Economy, has converted these challenges into numerous opportunities by continuing to invest heavily in major capital projects, by continuing to invest in the economy and public infrastructure projects. Not only are these projects and investments necessary, but the supplementary benefits of these projects certainly creates employment, it puts food on the table, and it cannot be underscored, particularly at this time, to cushion the effects and the impacts of this pandemic. So again, I'm happy to report on these investments. In terms of our completed projects, the ministry was successful in closing out key priority projects which significantly enhanced the level of service and safety for road users. These projects include the China-aided West Coast Road Post-Erica Rehabilitation Project. The 50 million investment involved the rehabilitation of sections of the EO-Libla Highway to include the construction of 3 major bridges, 13 culvert crossings, safety features, and other drainage features. As an additional intervention, we then constructed 5 culvert crossings at various locations, retaining walls and drains at Platma Pier and Grand Savan to further secure our road infrastructure. A 100-meter retaining wall was built along the Qualio Highway to address major failure along the riverbank near the primary school. And this fiscal year, we also successfully completed the Mont Prosper Road Rehabilitation Project, an intervention that brought great relief and safety to the community of Mont Prosper. And this included substantial earthworks, roadworks, drainage works at a cost exceeding $9 million. We are also addressing major edge failures along the Imperial Road. To date, we have stabilized 2 sections and will address another section later this month. 2 additional failures along the Dr. Nicholas Liverpool Highway will be addressed also. During this fiscal year, the community of Bagatelle welcomed the completion of a 50-foot segmented bridge at a cost of $2.3 million. Now, to get an appreciation of this intervention, one has to know the site or to know what entailed prior to the disasters. In this area, prior to the major flooding events, there existed a ford crossing with the water level being along road level, and this was completely washed away. The flooding events changed the hydraulics of the area. There was significant widening of the channel. There was a lot of accumulation of silt, boulders, and so on. The hydrology completely changed in this area, and the Ministry of Public Works embarked on a project to install this segmented bridge in the area. In terms of this cost, $2.3 million, what this entails is not just the bridge, the superstructure that we see, but it also includes the major investment in the substructure. That includes abutments on each side, the wing walls, the protection of the bank, the temporary bypass that was created to allow for free flow of traffic during the construction. And it's important, it's noteworthy to recognize that this substructure for this bridge can withstand future development or future expansion into a two-lane bridge. The substructure would really have the same bearing capacity as any other bridge around the island. So regardless of whether it's a segmented bridge or not, the substructure is sufficient enough and can ably withstand the loads of any large trucks that may traverse this area. And we have certainly catered this construction for future expansion. Heading north into the town of Portsmouth, they have also received a facelift in terms of the Bedford Street area. This project involved the rehabilitation of a 420-meter section, improvement of the drains. Other major projects completed include the rehabilitation of the Checkwell Road, improvements to Despo Road, sections of Cahome Feeder Road, and many others. These completed interventions come at a value of $60 million. And not only that, it has provided for jobs for over 200 people. And that is truly significant. As we continue to build a more robust and resilient infrastructure, the ministry is currently implementing several additional projects throughout the island. The construction of a 12-meter box culvert at Berukwa Granby is near completion. The scope of this project includes 48 meters of wing walls, 200 meters of rigid pavement, 40 meters of slipper drains, and river dredging upstream and downstream. 3 major road edge failures along Warner Highway are being completed right now. This project will greatly enhance and foster the redundancy in the island's road network. The road network in the community of Bells is receiving some attention also and upgrades. The ministry is currently making substantial improvements to 2 bridges in that community. Work is also ongoing on the construction of a wall and a culvert crossing in the village as well. In the east of the island, the old Good Hope Road is currently being rehabilitated. This road originally serves the communities of Good Hope and Sansofe, but it got compromised by a landslide event over 30 years ago. And it's imperative to reinstate this section of road to allow for any possible future development along or expansion along the existing road section that now serves these communities. In the Roseau Valley, the construction of the Cabanis Wall has commenced. The area suffered major edge failure, decreasing the utility and level of service of that road area, of that section. The project is important not only for the residents of the Roseau Valley, but also to accommodate and support the tourism sector. In close proximity to that project is the Coptal-Wattenwaven Road Rehabilitation Project. The project is nearing completion and will see the rehabilitation of nearly 600 meters of road and drainage from the Mont Prospect Junction through Coptal. These ongoing major interventions are valued at $7.5 million and currently provides employment for over 120 people. And this does not even include the East Coast Road project, which comes at a cost of $126 million, because this actually is implemented under the Ministry of Environment. So again, you see a recurring theme of creating opportunities, creating employment through building resilient infrastructure. In terms of planned interventions, in keeping with the ministry's strategic plans and objectives, several major projects were prioritized for this fiscal year. Among them is the construction of the Hillsborough Bridge. A contract signing ceremony was held on the 20th of April. The contractor will begin mobilization towards the end of next week. I have also been advised that the rehabilitation of the 4-kilometer road section between the Hillsborough Bridge and the York Valley Bridge will commence later this year, and the ministry is nearing completion of the procurement of this project. A new bridge will also be constructed in the village of Dubla to replace the old bridge, which was destroyed during the passage of Hurricane Maria. The contract signing ceremony was held last month, and I've been advised that the contractor has mobilized and the project is expected to be completed in 3 months. These planned interventions exceed $25 million, and we expect the creation of direct employment opportunities exceeding 250. The ministry has also placed focus on routine road maintenance, including asphalt patching, road repair, vegetation management, and so far we have spent in excess of $3.3 million on road rehabilitation, road maintenance, that's routine, and over $1.1 million on vegetation management. Collectively, 79 contractors around the island are engaged through vegetation management and asphalt patching. So out of the 79 contractors, this has created employment for at least 438 people. In terms of water resource management, the Ministry of Public Works and the Digital Economy is also responsible for the management of Dominica's water resources, like I said previously. The Dominica Water and Sewage Company, DOASCO, has led the implementation of several investments in an effort to ensure all our citizens are provided with safe and affordable drinking water. By the end of 2015, Dominica was well on its way to achieving this when Tropical Storm Erica disrupted 30% of our water supply, eroding the gains made over several years. The value of the damages and losses amounted to $52.5 million. The government of Dominica and DOASCO spared no efforts at restoring our water systems, and by the end of 2016, Dominica was again experiencing coverage of approximately 95% of the country. After achieving this progress post-Tropical Storm Erica, Hurricane Maria struck in 2017, destroying 45% of our infrastructure with an estimated cost of damage exceeding $104 million. With government's commitment and the hard work of our able team at DOASCO, we are now experiencing coverage of 98.5%. Government continues to invest heavily in an effort to build more robust water systems island-wide, and I am pleased to announce that we are nearing the completion of the first phase of the Water Sector Strategic Development Plan. Phase 2 of this plan will see upgrades to the West Coast, East Coast, Roseau Valley, Calibishi water systems, and the construction of new sanitation systems for Jimmet. Actual constructions of these systems and networks are scheduled to commence by the end of this year. In addition, current investments in excess of $51 million are being made towards the upgrade of Water Area 1, the rehabilitation of Bagatelle water supply, the development of the Mont Prosper water supply, and the installation of PV power supply at Tetmon and Jimmet pump stations, respectively. Though much emphasis has been placed on the development and maintenance of public infrastructure, the ministry also spent significant time creating a platform for the successful launch of the digital economy. In 2019, the government of Dominica signed an agreement with Digicel Dominica to upgrade its telecommunications infrastructure. Today, 250 sites have been completed with fiber connectivity, Wi-Fi, and voice communication. 84 critical sites have been completed with CCTV, 20 sites with satellite solutions, and 62 sites with microwave services. In other words, the government's built-for-purpose fiber optic infrastructure network is now complete. and currently connecting various government sites across Dominica, providing internet, data, cloud, and other ICT services to all these sites. And I'm pleased to see and be supported by the Minister of Telecoms and Broadcasting, who is here, and we work so well together in achieving our thrust towards building a digital economy. And this is important because the robust infrastructure that's being laid down is in fact the launchpad for the digital economy. To ensure that the targets set by the government are achieved, the ministry capitalized on the World Bank Caribbean Digital Transformation Project, and along with the Ministry of Finance, we were able to successfully provide the necessary documentations, finalize the appraisals and the negotiations to secure a facility of US $28 million. And I have no doubt that this will indeed transform Dominica into the most digitally advanced society in the English-speaking Caribbean, and to be at the forefront of the global knowledge economy. The project aims to develop the core foundations to enable digitization of government and improved access and adoption of digital services, skills, and technologies among individuals and businesses. The project contains three main components. One, focusing on digital enabling environment that will support the digital economy that drives the competition, investment, and innovation while promoting the trust and security for online transactions. As we seek to digitize services, we are mindful of cyber attacks, cyber threats that can severely impact the provision of digital services or online transactions. We'll therefore establish a national computer emergency response team, and we will be working very closely with the Ministry of National Security as well as our regional partners in the OECS. Another component will focus on digital government infrastructure, platforms, and services. This component will support public sector modernization, resilience, and delivery of digital public services to individuals and businesses. The final component will focus on digital skills and technology adoption. Our PIU has already tendered for the procurement of 8,100 digital devices for students, which will enable them to take advantage in e-learning opportunities. And these devices are expected to be here by the end of July of this year. Another major activity under the Caribbean Digital Transformation Project is the development and implementation of the National Health Management Information System. The system will collect, store, manage, and transmit a patient's electronic medical records to support healthcare decisions. For instance, if a patient at the Portsmouth Hospital is transported to the Dominica China Friendship Hospital, the records of that patient will be available electronically at the Dominica China Friendship Hospital ahead of the patient's arrival, thus making it easier, thus making it faster and more efficient for healthcare service and treatment of that patient. The PIU has already engaged stakeholders such as the New Hospital Authority and the management of the Ministry of Health, Wellness, and New Health Investment. The Ministry of Public Works and the Digital Economy has pursued other digital initiatives. With the support of the UNDP, we spearheaded a digital readiness assessment using a tool that provided for high-level insight into Dominica's digital strengths and weaknesses. This project is completed and will provide a clear roadmap for our country's digital agenda, including our digital strategy. Building on earlier successes with the UNDP, we have received support to undertake this digital strategy, and they have already engaged a consultant. And we have assigned one of our telecoms engineers, again, thanks to the close collaboration with the Minister of Telecoms and Broadcasting, so that there can be this partnership with UNDP to ensure that we realize our strategy. And this strategy will actually build on the digital readiness assessment that was already completed. With people being one of the focus areas of our digital economy, the ministry has focused on young people. And we have done so for them to take advantage of the job market and the gig economy. With the support of the UNDP and Israel, the ministry launched Work Online Dominica program, where 60 participants were guided and trained to generate income online by leveraging and building their digital skills. At least 55 of these 60 participants have already obtained jobs and gigs online. Based on this success, we are planning to launch a second cohort of this Work Online program. As I close, please permit me to quote one of the participants from our Work Online Dominica program. My experience in the Work Online Dominica project was phenomenal. It exceeded my expectation. And the fact that I was able to land a job before the program ended was even more of a success for me. I embraced the training provided and utilized it in every aspect of my life. Lessons learned in this course are also beneficial for office jobs, and I will continue to allow this experience to impact my life in a positive way. The Ministry of Public Works and Digital Economy remains focused on implementing government's policy and priorities. And in doing so, we are also very pleased about the employment, the avenues, the opportunities, and the jobs that are being created. There is a quote, every day of one's existence, one is growing into more or retreating into less. I am happy that notwithstanding the many challenges, notwithstanding the many adversities, that each day, every day, by God's grace, we are growing into more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for this very detailed presentation. I am sure you were also able to follow along with us some of the photos of the ongoing projects and the ongoing works, but I would also encourage the media on your weekend drive, move around, and you can see some of these projects for yourself. At this time, we will now open the floor to questions from the media. So you will stand, tell us your first name at least, and your media house, and proceed. Let us know who the question is for. We will take the ministers will take the questions from the table. Yes. Okay, so who starts? Ms. Pending.
Hi, good day. My name is Jaya Pending. I'm here from DBS Radio, and I have a few questions for each of you, but first off, for Ms. Greta Roberts. First, should I list the questions? One or two? Two of them, okay. First question is in regards, these two questions are in regards to your constituency. First question, one of your campaign promises was to provide housing for the residents of your constituency. You said at the time that housing is an urgent need. How far have you gone to addressing the housing needs of your constituency? And your constituency is predominantly an agricultural one. What steps will you take to encourage the people to see agriculture as something viable?
Thank you very much. Ms. Spending. Hello? Okay, good. I guess I made this promise to my constituents, and we have kept our promises as a government. We have already set up our apartment buildings to house over 200 of the constituents, 63 apartments. So now I can say with great pride that we have succeeded in helping the constituents, in helping my constituents to better housing needs. So we have served over 200 just using the 63 apartments. In addition to that, in the Rivière Cyric Monjon area, a place that is highly vulnerable, we have set up 15 houses, concrete structures. To date, we have about 5 that are ready, so the constituents, the homeowners can move in. We have about 4 of them who would have to wait for at least 2 months before they can move in. And the others, what I did, 5 and 4, 9, 9 from 15, we can count quickly. And the balance is just minor works. We are looking at rendering, plumbing, you know, the finishing touches that take a long time. So this is more or less windows and doors. This is what we are missing to have them to move in. So far we have done a very good job with housing. I am one of the parliamentarians, the parliamentary representatives, who can boast that housing in the area has been taken care of by this government. Your second question was with regards to agriculture. Yes, we are an agricultural community. I always boast of having the best dashing. I'm happy that the Minister for Youth, the St. Joseph area, is not there. She always argues with me that bells can beat us, but that's not so. Actually, just last week, I handed some dashing to somebody in Roseau, and they told me if I could give them dashing for Mother's Day. So that just tells you. Our farmers are doing very well. One of the issues with our farmers is with our feeder roads, and we are trying our best to make our roads motorable. I cannot promise the farmers that the feeder roads can be completed as they would like, because you have to understand with the Ministry of Agriculture, and I'm happy the minister is here, that this would depend on acreage and the number of farmers who are actually producing in that area. So in some of the areas, it is limited. So what we are doing now is to try just to ensure that the roads are motorable so they can get to their farms. I must commend the farmers in the Hot Air Road, in the Monjon area, because we did an assessment here, and the officers from the Ministry of Agriculture were quite impressed at the number of farmers who have maintained their farms in a very good manner during that time. But so far so good. We have ensured that we have markets. I'm always speaking to the Minister of Trade. He's right there too, so God has blessed me this morning. And then we have markets available. The problem that we have with this constituency and maybe with others is consistency. They can provide this week, and in 2 weeks' time we come and we have a limited number. But other than that, the market is available, so our farmers can produce as much food as possible. Thank you.
In 2 further questions for you. Your ministry has embarked on dealing with vacancies in the public service, making appointments, but it has been suggested that not enough is being done. It has been a suggestion. And in your presentation today, you mentioned that of the 191 appointments made, that is a 142% increase from last year. What has state appointments for, so why is it such a large increase? And could you say, what are the roadblocks? Have there been any roadblocks in making appointments?
I would not consider it roadblocks. It's more of a name block. Meaning we have been sending so many names to the Public Service Commission that probably it's just slow in getting it done. But we have tried our best. This is a promise we also made to ensure that all public officers who have been in the service for more than 2 years, PM, you can correct me on that, would get their appointments, and we have been doing this. I was boastful when we did the 163, I think it was last year, and then I mentioned the 191 this time. I think I have an update on this, if you just bear with me, just to give you, because this year we are trying to focus on school principals, We are trying to focus on prison officers, nurses, and let me see if I get it for you. I just want to give you the correct number once I can find it. Okay. So nurses, school principals, prison officers, and all legal officers. So if I am to break it down for you, from the Ministry of Education, 59 already recommended, 77 from the Ministry of Health, 22 from the National Security, 33 from other ministries throughout the public service, and this is what adds up to the 191. So collectively, this represents the 259 appointments. And bear in mind, this is just half of the year, and we have already done all this. So I think we have done a very good job at getting our public officers appointed, a promise that was kept. Thank you. There was another question?
Good afternoon, Kimani Sergeant, Cairo News. I have two questions for the Honorable Prime Minister. The $67 million that you mentioned, you said it's for various projects. I wanted to know if there is going to be any particular area of focus. And secondly, Antigua just announced that they're going to give a sort of incentive to increase the numbers in terms of vaccination. I'm wondering, because we're doing well, but we still have a long way to go to get to that percentage for herd immunity, if this is something that we would consider in terms of giving people incentive to take the vaccine.
Thank you. Last question we have not. We've been discussing this. And people have to understand that it is in their personal best interest to get vaccinated. If we want our lives to get back to a state of normal and the country get back to a state of normal, and we can see increased economic activities, and people can get the more jobs available. People who have lost their jobs can get back into the jobs. People who have lost days' work can get back to their full-time employment. I think it's in our interest to do so. But, you know, different countries have used different strategies and approaches to encourage people to get vaccinated. In one of the communities in Israel, you know, you get vaccinated and you get a box of pizza. You know, so people have used different approaches to get vaccinated. So it's something that we can look at if we think there's merit to it, but it's not a decision we have taken here. In respect to the $67 million that we will be receiving from the World Bank, some of those funds will go towards housing, because there are some families who certainly need their homes completed. There are several homes that have started or are completed, especially as we fast approaching the hurricane season. So some funds will be made available to address the vulnerability of many families across Dominica. Some of those funds will also be used, I believe, to amortize our outstanding commitments to students studying overseas, and also to make payments to suppliers of goods and services of the government. And an amount will be set aside for rainy days, which is a responsible thing to do. And of course there are other smaller things that we'll use the funds for, but certainly it will be used to address some of our challenges. And of course, We'll also use some of it to reduce on our overdraft facility at the National Bank of Dominica as well. And I believe some will be set aside to make payments, I believe loan payments. But as always, we use these monies judiciously, and we use it where we believe at the given time it is absolutely necessary to make those interventions. Obviously, anytime you spend, there are many other things that you could use the money for. That's the reality not only for the government, but also for individual families. There's always something always comes up. And even, for example, people, when you look at the cutting of the grass along the roads in Dominica, the various contracts we have, people may say it's just cutting grass, but it's a huge cost. It's a huge cost, Every time I see this contract, I put my hand on my head and I'm asking, and I keep sending it back and saying, can we reduce, can we cut? Yeah, and then we have to do some dredging of some critical rivers in anticipation of the hurricane season. So the money will certainly be well spent, and it will be spent in the country, on the economy, and people will see the benefit of it. Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. Rhonda Luke, freelance journalist. This question is directed to Mr. Roberts. Mrs. Roberts. It's as it pertains to your constituency. In 2017, we saw the opening of the ITC Smart Center, the first of its kind. According to reports from villagers, the Smart Center is not accessible to residents in that area just as yet. It's not fully functional. So can we get an update as to why this is the case, and when will this be accessible to residents in Grand Fort and the surrounding areas?
Yes, we have been working on the Smart Center. I think Mr. Oscar George, Honorable, came in with his team to look at the Smart Center to see what was needed. We have completed the renovation works on the center. Right now we are just awaiting the equipment. We have also sourced the people who are going to assist us, the staff, with the center. So pretty soon, Mr. George, again, I also have the minister there with me. Mr. George has assured me that we should be opening soon, most likely by the beginning of the next school year in September. So we should be able to use it by then. Thank you.
Thank you. So to Mr. Laville. Speaking on your portfolio of transportation, in 2015, it was announced that a bus terminal in the city of Roseau forms part of the master plan. At that time, it was also announced that an unnamed firm will be doing studies, the feasibility study of that bus terminal. Can we get an update on this project, please?
All right. All right, thank you. Well, obviously, we witness every day the challenges we have in our city. Every month, we see boats coming in, and we import vehicles over and over. To some extent, maybe not environmentally, but in terms of the appearance of growth in the economy, the mere fact that we're importing more vehicles shows that the standard of life of many people is improving, which is good. But obviously, we're having a challenge in terms of the capacity of the roads, access to parking, and so on. And we feel it even more so in the city of Roseau. It is certainly our priority, it continues to be our priority to address these issues of parking in the city of Roseau. And while you say it was announced in 2015 that we should build a bus terminal, but we have been discussing these issues, and we still don't think that only one bus terminal will address the challenges of parking that we have in the city of Roseau. When we speak to 2015, we cannot speak of a bus terminal in isolation of the national disaster and the tragedy that we have had in Dominica. And when we think of what happened in Erica, we did not start off the year knowing that you would have such a life-changing and life-ending disaster in the south, the people of Petit Savan. So priorities shift for governments, and this is certainly one of the things that happened. And we are all here, praise God, we are alive to witness the investment and the transformation and the way the government responded to the needs of the people of Petit Savan. So for them, I mean, I'm proud to be part of a government that shifted from a bus terminal in Roseau to being there for the people of Petit Savan in 2015. So again, this continues to be on our cards, but as we prioritize with the various challenges, you heard me say that every 2.5 years our GDP is affected negatively, that is by 59% on average, and that every 2.5 years that we suffer some type of disaster, major disaster, priorities shift. But like I said, we have our 2020-2025 strategic development plan, and that is certainly there, and we intend to realize this dream for many of us to have our bus terminals, not only one, but possibly for the north section, the east, the north, the south, and people commuting from the valley.
Very good response. I just wanted to, because I hear these kind of questions coming sometimes on social media and so on. People tend to forget where this country was when this government came into office in 2000. The country was bankrupt. The country was owing every single person on this earth. The country was not paying public officers, not 10 days or 15 days after the month has passed. Only 7% of all high school graduates had access to the community college. Only 44% of all primary school graduates had access to secondary school. If you did not know somebody in the Ministry of Education, or you do not have what we call a surname in Dominica, so Skerrit could never get a scholarship to anyway to go to Dominica. Even when I applied, I think I was a smart student, it's MLA from grammar school, and so you know, now every child who is sent to school is taking this for granted that it is a must, it's an obligation, it is a right as enshrined in the Constitution of Dominica. And not seeing it as a privilege to get a scholarship, to go to a university and to earn a similar degree and to be independent and to create wealth for themselves. And we have to forget that every single road in Dominica, everyone was in bad shape. Everyone was in bad shape. We had asbestos pipes supplying water, including in urban communities. Up to the point when I became Prime Minister, I was shocked to know that on Federation Drive and on Goodwood Road, that we had asbestos pipes in 2004 supplying water. Don't even talk about Portsmouth and Marigot and Girardel, Eggleston, Castle Comfort did not have a potable water supply system. Urban areas, suburban areas, that we had no night landing. When 4 o'clock comes, and especially Christmas time, it gets dark very quickly. They had to tell you we're going back because we can't land in Dominica. We had to expand the airport, rebuild the terminal building, introduce night landing so we can extend the operational hours of our country. And that this country was faced with many disasters, from 2004 with the earthquake in the north, to the Ophelia, and you name them. And I get the impression that in Dominica, people are taking all what this lower party government has done for granted because we don't complain, we don't boast, we make it look like it's easy, because the leadership of the country doesn't complain. There's everybody in Dominica who's saying, but how come Skerrit doesn't have all gray hairs? I mean, if all that he has to deal with all of these natural disasters and its external shocks. That when we woke up after Hurricane Maria, we all felt that Dominica was finished. And then we were able to rebuild homes and bridges and schools and hospitals and health centers. That when we came into office, there was no 5-star hotel in Dominica. There's no international brands. Now we have those in Dominica. That the West Bridge, the main bridge in Dominica, was a one lane. Now it's a resilient two-lane structure that withstood the worst hurricane we saw in human history in Dominica. That we've had to build retaining walls, literally from Scott's Head all the way to Capuchin, to provide sea defense mechanisms from erosion and from land slippages. And this government reduced our debt from 130% of GDP when we got into government to, at the time of coronavirus, to 72% of GDP, and we were going to reduce it. And my plan with the savings that I was putting in place prior to the hurricane was to reduce our debt to GDP to 25% of GDP. We're paying off our debts. My plan was to pay off $500 million of our debts by saving money. At the time of hurricane, we had $360 million saved. And so people were saying, okay, Skerrit, you promised road enhancement. But road enhancement is a program. It's not a project. It's a program. The West Bridge and the retaining walls was one component of the program. The promenade was one component of the program. The next component of the program will be Independence Street, Great Judge Street, Independence Street, and we're going to commence with Great Judge Street. We have revolutionized primary health care and secondary health care and tertiary health care in Dominica with the improvement of infrastructure. When I became Prime Minister of this country, except the persons who were trained in the 70s and the 80s as consultant doctors, we had no Dominicans who were trained. Now the entire hospital is littered with local Dominicans from humble beginnings as consultants at our national hospital. All sent to university by this Dominican Labour Party. All. These things cost money. And people talk about, you keep changing this thing, you say you're going to put a flamboyant tree and you plant an almond tree and so on, and where's the flamboyant tree? There's an almond tree. So let's get shade from it for the time being while we wait for the beautiful, flowery, flamboyant tree. But we cannot say that we have made progress. And just imagine, my dear brothers and sisters, just imagine if we had been hit by Tropical Storm Erica or Maria, how much money we spent just in responding to these hurricanes. And if we were to use this money to build on what we had in the country. A road to Cardinal Territory and Castle Bruce and Atkinson, $127 million for a road. I wish, we had a flat country with no mountains and no rivers, or not so many rivers. Look at the road from Canefield, from Roseau, all the way to the Douglas Chelsea Airport. How many rivers you have to cross? And every one of those rivers, when I became Prime Minister, was a single-lane bridge. Single-lane bridge. Now, every one of these bridges are two-lane bridges. We have to reconstruct them. That's the reality. And put yourselves as the head of your household and pretend you're the head of the country. Many of us, we have to be just juggling with demands from our children and so forth. This is why sometimes we have to go to the fast money business to get a little money to see us through for a period of time. Though some of us are not managing this stuff properly, we take too much money from these people. But we have, that's what it is. There's no government before this Labour Party government that helped anybody who was affected by any natural disaster. Hurricane David came, I remember this. Nobody got money to build homes. We got some green hearts from Guyana, and of course the then Labour Party gave it to a few Labour rights at the time. And people had to go in the bushes, in the forest and harvest fallen trees, and to cut them and to make their homes. That's why you see many homes in Dominica, they have local wood as their rafters. That's what's faced. Farmers never got any money from natural disasters. They got money if they were insured on the wind ban by other farmers. But nobody with yams and potatoes and plantains and dashing would get this kind of support. Now we have $67 million under one program. Monies to farmers and fishermen. Fishermen going to get 85 horsepower outboard motor at no charge to them. When it will happening? And we reduced the interest rates from the banks and the aid bank from 12% to 3% and 2% and 4% for the private sector. It is we, the government, that's costing the National Bank and Republic Bank and now formerly Royal Bank to reduce their interest rates for housing. That's where we can go and get a 4.75% interest rate at these banks for housing. We pioneered that as a government with 4% to the public servants and 5% to other people for the aid bank. You see, the problem we have in this Labour Party, this government, is that we don't tell the stories. We ourselves taking things for granted. The leadership of the country, because we do it not for boast, we do it because we have a responsibility to do it, and we do it. But I believe that it's important for us to start telling these stories, because people tend to forget, or they pretend they're forgetting, or to make political mileage, they say, well, Skerrit promised this and he hasn't done that. How many of us have given our children all what they asked for in this country? When the children are walking in town, people shopping, and every time they see something they want, they tell them no without the money. Christmas time or your birthday, and when the birthday comes, the child reminds us of our birthday, and we have to keep our word. We have to go and sometimes borrow the money from these fast money places. Some of us even put in our computer or laptop inside there to get the money to buy the gift you promised our child. I mean, I know what happened in America, you know. I mean, there's nothing I do not know happening in America. I mean, you know, and we go online, and Amazon is a big business these days. We shop online, and our packages come there and so on, and we're good to go. The reality is, it's not easy. But we cannot, you can love or like, you can support or not support this Labour Party government. You cannot contend the fact that this Labour Party administration has done wonders by the grace of God in this country. And there are many more wonders that will come with the construction of the airport and with more infrastructural development, addressing the social fabric of our country, ensuring that the vulnerable, the senior citizens and the children and the disabled can have food on the table based on government social investment policies. And all of his policies people have criticized, some people have criticized, a few have criticized. Yes, you care. People say it's going to be for 1 year. Gaddafi say, people say Gaddafi told me it's for 1 year giving money, so after that 1 year, it gone. 10 years ago, Gaddafi died. He was murdered. And this airstrike is going on for 14 years. Because these programs are ordered divinely. The housing revolution, ensuring that students not only have access to education, but they have the means of taking advantage of the access. Free school books, free uniforms, free transportation. All the students have to do in Dominica is to go and study the books and do well. And the parents must not go lime with the snack money and then send the children to school with no snack. We have to take responsibility in this country. So, Dominicans will tell me, who could replace this government and provide that kind of leadership and that kind of guidance and that kind of economic transformation? The whole world is flabbergasted by what we have done to our country following Hurricane Maria. The entire world. That's this stuff. So, if we didn't get a bus stop, and they showed the bus stop. We had the designs for the bus stop, washrooms, cafeterias, parking bays, and we went to the public to discuss with them. There was complete opposition by certain bus drivers and bus associations about the construction of the bus terminal across the river by the apartments there on the riverbank. We had designed these things. This was completely designed, and we were about to start. And I stopped it. We were about to start. I stopped it because I said, let us consult the people before. And when we went to the consultation, then we ended up with a barrage of opposition to it. But we didn't get the bus. So what did we get? We got a promenade where people are making money, people are becoming opportunities, people are employed. We didn't get the bus terminal. What did we get? We got a bridge. We got a bridge. And we got an improvement to the East Silver Bridge. Thank you.
I have a follow-up question to what you were just speaking about, Mr. Prime Minister, and it's in terms of the CREED, the Climate Resilience Execution Agency. We know that there are several components to this, several things are going on. But in terms of climate resiliency, because this is something that we pronounced, we want to be the first climate resilient country in the world, and obviously it's important so that we don't repeat the cycle of having to reprioritize important funds. So I wanted to know, are you satisfied so far with how the CREED or how our climate resilience strategy is going on? And secondly, also, I remember there were some discussions about countries like Dominica being, frequently affected by natural disasters, some sort of insurance scheme, like with the CDB, that we don't find ourselves repeating that reprioritization of funds. Where are we on this?
Yeah, the whole journey towards building greater resilience has started. We have the strategic documents in place. We are following the strategies that we have articulated in these documents. We are not only looking at the issue of the physical infrastructure in our country, but we're also looking at financial resilience, fiscal resilience. And this is why you have seen us articulated and implemented a number of measures to enhance our fiscal resilience, to enhance our financial resilience, and therefore economic resilience. And there have been a number of measures that we've taken that we also will be implementing. We've also set up the Vulnerability Risk Fund at the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank that we're putting in $500,000. It's not a lot, but we're in a difficult patch. Once we get off this difficult patch, we're going to increase this amount to the fund, so that in the event of a natural disaster, we will be in a better position. Well, we have access to some funds that we can draw down to address this thing, or even external shock. So there are different components. You're looking at agriculture. What are the crops we should be planting? Where we should be planting those crops, etc. Looking at our schools, ensuring that the schools themselves are resilient in the design, resilient in the engineering, and resilient in the construction. And also with the construction of the new health centers, the new hospitals, taking all our vulnerability issues into consideration and ensuring that in an event of natural disaster, we won't have a situation where a roof of a health center has blown off or window, etc. People will be able to go to these health centers and receive care with no interruption whatsoever. And in respect to the emergency shelters that we've spoken about, this is part of our strategy because, as you know, hurricane shelters are largely schools, churches sometimes, and community centers. What we're trying to avoid, as far as practically possible, is for us to keep using schools as hurricane shelters. Because one of the most important things a country has to do after a natural disaster is to try to get people back to their normal way of life as quickly as possible. And getting people back into schools is a critical component, critical consideration. And so with the construction of these resource centers, emergency shelters across the country, we will reduce dramatically that occurrence. Because in some communities, people stayed in the shelters for a couple of months, in the schools for a couple of months, denying student access to the schools, and so forth. So it is not something that you're going to achieve in 5 years. This is why you see the plan is up to 2030. and ensuring that we address more of the critical components. This is why in our construction of the bridges, of the retaining walls, of the roads, we take those things into consideration. With regards to our water system, I see the general manager is there. As you know, there's a commitment from the UK government to provide funding to government, to the WASCO, to improve on the resilience of the water system at Dowasco. And there has been a preliminary study has been done, and work is ongoing in regards to enhancing that. So in the event that we have a natural disaster, we're in a better position to provide the country with potable drinking water much quicker than we normally would as we've experienced before. So then there are a number of different components. The minister has spoken about the digital transformation and the telecommunications infrastructure that the government has put in place to respond to natural disasters, to withstand natural disasters. So that we don't find ourselves completely cut off from the rest of the world, as was the case after Maria. There's some systems that we can use to allow us to be in touch with the world in the event that we were affected. And of course, housing is a very important component in this, ensuring that families at their homes can be safe in the event of natural disasters. And that in itself would limit on the need to go into public hurricane shelters, and people can stay at their homes and even use their homes as hurricane shelters, because their homes will be constructed in a resilient nature. Thank you. Sorry, if you have a question for me, I have a funeral to attend, so I'm going to have to leave. But you have a question for me? Yeah, okay, sure. But you can ask us any question you ask them, and any response they give you is my response also. So.
The final question was on
except when is the date for the next general election.
Okay.
So
the final question was on St. Vincent, just an update on what is happening with the nationals we said we'd accept.
Yeah, I just saw a correspondence from the government of St. Vincent addressed from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of St. Vincent and Grenadines to the Foreign Ministry of Dominica, indicating that about 81 Vincentians have agreed to be relocated to Dominica for the period of time. So as I understand it, that we're in discussions with them, in communication with them, to get the details of the people, the structure of the people coming, are the families, are the singles, are the couples, so that we can know how to go about assigning the residences for them and what arrangements we have to make for their arrival in Dominica. So that discussion is ongoing, and I'm hoping that very soon we can start receiving our brothers and sisters from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So the Prime Minister has had to leave, but just to ask whether we have any further questions for the two ministers, or are we going to wrap up?
A question, yes.
Okay, so can you just ask all the rest of your questions, and then we'll just wrap up? Okay, thanks.
Yes. A question to Honorable Roberts. In regards to the Ministry of Ecclesiastical Affairs, do you have any update on the portfolio of that ministry, anything happening within that ministry and within that aspect of the ministry? And do you have any updates on the stats for COVID vaccinations within the public service? And a question to Honorable Kasani Laville. In regards to the Canefield Cliff, there was recently a sign, I'm not sure if it's still there, saying beware of falling rocks, but sometimes those rocks are boulders. So are there any plans on stream to address what could become fatal issues under the Canefield Cliff?
So, what you want, ecclesiastic? We are a God-fearing nation, and the government has ensured that the ministry is actually there to work with the faith-based organizations. We have met with them, especially now during the COVID pandemic, because they have been assisting us along with the Ministry of Health in trying to ensure that protocols are followed throughout church services and, of course, funerals, which they claim was one of the major issues that they have had. In addition to that, we are trying our best to see how we can support them, because to them, they felt that as a group of people trying to save the nation, they felt honored that we had at least considered them to be part of the government's program. So it is ongoing. We promised that following the pandemic, or at least when it is lessened, that we will have closer relationships with them to try to ensure that everything is covered. COVID-19 starts within the public service. I know that the vaccinations are ongoing within the public service, but I honestly do not have any stats as to how many of our public officers have been vaccinated. I can do that and probably get in contact with you and let you know. Thank you so much. Okay.
As it relates to the Canefield Cliff, of course, you're right, in fact, that there are signs in this area. Basically, it's to ensure that everyone is aware that they should proceed in this area or traverse this area with extreme caution. Just by our geomorphology or rock formation and so on, we are challenged all over. And this area in the Canefield Cliff is certainly no exception. We know the Eo-Libla Highway, particularly this area from West Indies Oil all the way to, say, Deepwater Harbor might be one of the most heavily traversed areas along our road network. And because this is like a collector street for a lot of the traffic from the north and the east as well. So many mornings you would see there would be a traffic jam in this area, so that poses even a greater vulnerability and challenge for us. One of the things that we have done was to explore ways of addressing this concern in the Canefield area. So of course, one of the simpler ways, but certainly something that should not be underscored, is the issue of implementing and placing signs. We have looked at alternative routes or accesses for this area. So the ministry has embarked on looking at a route, a diversion or bypass, as we may call it, from Ravenquock to Mont Daniel. And they've done extensive studies and investigations. There was an old track in that area, but it has suffered tremendously. It has been reduced to a footpath, in all honesty. And there are major issues of land acquisitions that we need to resolve in order to use that area. Because to do any work in the Canefield Cliff area, we will need alternative access. So we first have to resolve that issue of alternative access, likely through the Ravenquock area to Mont Daniel, and even sections along the Mont Daniel Road, which are effectively a one lane because it's a residential area, so improvements would have to be done there. Based on the studies conducted by the ministry, we have initial cost for just that bypass and that improvement, not even including the acquisitions, exceeding $8 million. So it is quite a massive undertaking. One thing we have done, though, in the interest of due caution and diligence, is that we have been observing very closely any possible cracks and fissures in the rocks and the rock formation. So we are looking at 2 right now, vertical cracks. And like we've done in the Taro area, for example, is whenever we identify, or even in some cases the public identifies a potential risk, maybe a rock that's perched, we address it immediately. There's also another challenge in the area of Mont Daniel Cliff, where there are private homes at the top of that cliff. So if we look closely and through some of the brush and the bushes, we might actually see a few homes. So while in some areas, say for example, Mont Prosper Road, we could do that shelving for slope stability, this is something that cannot be easily done in that area because of the issues of major acquisitions at the top. So we also have to either look at that or look at other different engineering solutions, for example, nets, soil nailing, and so on. But we've certainly been exploring the options for that area, and there's some administrative and legal considerations that we're contending with prior to moving. It has to be planned very well before you actually see any work in that area, but it's for consideration.
One more question. Yes. Yes, last question. In terms of the digital economy, it's something that's relatively new to, us in Dominica. Even with COVID-19 and having to do more things online, you still see people opting for forming the line at the banks or, doing more paper-based transactions. So I wanted to know from your ministry in terms of your approach. You spoke about the hospital, ensuring that records, you can get that digitally, that all government offices are linked. What is the strategy to ensure that this is something that is really sustainable when it is done? And how far-reaching will it be? Will it also at some point involve the private sector as well, or is it just government?
That is indeed a loaded question. But digital economy, and no offense to my CTO, Emil Lancelot, but digital economy is the most exciting component of our portfolio. So with that being said, it is something that has already proven to be quite sustainable. And we have seen in the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic that we have come to appreciate and come to rely, in some cases, almost completely on digital economy, on internet, on telecommunications, on information, on access to information and services using online portals. And you would see there's certainly been a reduction in the lines at the various utility companies. Mr. Etinoff is here and he can certainly attest to that. But obviously there is some resistance in some aspects, in some particular demographics in our population, particularly some of our seniors were slightly more averse to the use and adoption of technology. One of the things that we can do, though, to rope them in is to not just pay the bills for them, but show them how to pay the bills. So say for me, as opposed to paying a bill for my grandmother, I should probably show her how to do it herself so that she will be more inclined to accept that move, that transition to accepting digital economy. It is something we've seen in our schools. Some schools were completely online. In some parts of the world, some schools are still completely online. Some people have experienced 3 and 4 lockdowns. We've seen that in Europe. And here comes the reliance and the acceptance of digital economy. One thing that we have seen in the past, many people think digital economy is really digitization. And what I mean by that, it's simply converting an aspect of our lives or business to a digital means. Say, for example, you'll see my colleague minister and myself, we're using paper, but I also use my digital device as well because we have to lead by example. And that's what we have been doing. And they also have been playing a major role in terms of the adoption of digital methods and means, but we have been leading the way in the government service. We know in small economies like our own, in many cases, the government actually leads and private sector follows. And that's what we've been doing. So it's not that there's no investment or there's not a plan to invest in the private sector, but we are merely leading the way by first doing it with the investment in our infrastructure. And we've seen that through the multi-million contract we have signed with Digicel Dominica to invest in our network around the island to link and connect our government facilities and to have redundancy in so many levels of our communication, and not only having fiber optic cables overhead and underground, but even microwave and satellite. So that's the type of investment we have made as government first to merely lead the way. But we have components under our transformation project where it's solely focused on young people, young professionals, and the private sector. And there's a pillar for that in terms of digital skills and technology adoption. So we are planning to invest over $6 million in that $27 million facility in digital skills and technology adoption. So the private sector certainly stands to benefit. And like I said earlier, 55 young professionals have already benefited from those investments. And in terms of preparation for the gig economy, which we did not wait for a first disbursement from the World Bank facility, and we went ahead with our innovation to start training these young professionals. So that investment certainly continues. I know this is sustainable. We believe in this. It's in the manifesto for the party. This administration has actually campaigned on that premise that digital economy will certainly transform our overall economy and the economic ties and fortunes of Dominica. So it's something that we all should be excited about, and we all should be interested in knowing more and asking the right questions and knowing how we can actually fit in and stand to benefit into the advancements for the digital economy.
Thank you very much, Minister. And let me just take this opportunity to close up and thank, of course, the Honorable Prime Minister and the Minister for Governance and Minister for Public Works for sharing with us today. The other members of Cabinet who have attended and have been here to support this morning, our staff from the various ministries, Permanent Secretaries, Chief Personnel Officer, and of course the media for being here and for carrying this press conference live. So we will see you again at our next press conference, hopefully in the next month or so. But thank you very much and have a good lunch to everyone. Thank you to all our listeners for following this press conference live. Thanks.